Welcome to another episode of the Underground Bunker Podcast. I'm your proprietor, Tony Ortega, and we have back one of our favorite guests, Mark Bunker, city councilman from the city of Clearwater, Florida. How are you, Mark?
I'm doing great. Thanks for inviting me back.
Well, you've done a couple of great things for the bunker. There's this labor trafficking lawsuit that was filed back in April of last year by Valeska Paris and a married couple, Gawain and Laura Baxter. All three of them are residents of Australia, but they were all in the Sea Org and they were all on the Free Winds, Scientology's cruise ship. And they are alleging that they were forced into the Sea Org as children. They were treated horribly. They were basically forced labor on the ship. Just awful, awful allegations. But two things are holding up the lawsuit in an interesting way. One, they are arguing that Scientology is arguing that these Sea Org members signed contracts which oblige them not to sue in court, and they are supposed to go to arbitration. And Mark, you went down to the courthouse to hear the arguments on that matter,
Mhm.
and filed a hilarious report for us. And then the other thing that Scientology is doing about it is they do not want David Miscavige to be a defendant. The other defendants have all accepted service and they've got attorneys. There's like five to four different institutional defendants, like the Flag Service Organization, the Flagship Service Organization, the stuff that runs the ship. But David Miscavige has not accepted service. He's evaded service, the plaintiffs allege, and that that's gotten to be such a complicated thing. They had a separate hearing just about that, and you went to that for us. So I wanted to ask you about how that went and your thoughts about some of the arguments that were made. We're recording this on Friday afternoon. We still don't have a ruling on either of those matters. I just checked the docket, but these are federal judges. They take their time, and so this is let me tell you, this is not new. David Miscavige has been evading service for years. I know there's a lot of stories people are seeing this week from TMZ and others saying David Miscavige is missing. Like this is some new story. It's not. He's not missing. He's just evading process. He's evading these process servers. He presided at the New Year's Eve party at the Fort Harrison Hotel just 3 weeks ago. So we know he's not missing. He's just playing cat and mouse. And but also it's not just that he's keeping himself away from process servers. These attorneys are making some bizarre arguments. Can you, Mark, just set the scene for us? And I don't think I've been to that particular courthouse. And this was the main case is being handled by a Judge Thomas Barber, but this is a magistrate judge. Put us in that spot, will you?
Well, it was a very nice courtroom, and the judge was a youngish woman,
Uh huh.
and she impressed me. Um, it was. It's always interesting to see the tables worth of attorneys for Scientology's side, and then there's our heroes over on our side. Um, and when we were waiting for this to start, I was sitting next to Tracy McManus, who was, of course, reporting for the Tampa Bay Times,
Right.
and I thought, how hard could this be? We should be able to have an answer by the end of this meeting, which I guess was
Right.
nuts, but we both agreed that yeah, it really shouldn't be that difficult. They've tried 27 times to serve Miscavige at five different locations here in Clearwater and five in
Wow.
LA. And everywhere they went, the process servers were told by security, well, it's not here. I don't know. Why not try? Why not try somewhere else, like the other side of the country? Because he's not
Right.
here in Florida, for God's sakes, which is insane because he is spending a lot of time here in Florida. In fact, we talk to him all the time. Well, not me personally, but he's talking to the city about his devious plans for our downtown. Um, so we know he's around, or
Right. And
can be around when he wants to be around. And that is incredibly frustrating that, you know, Scientology continues to get away with these games. In fact, the attorney for the three defendants or the three plaintiffs in the human trafficking lawsuit, he actually said to the judge, let's stop this cat and mouse game. Um, and it was clear that that's what's going on. The hearing itself took about 90 minutes,
An hour
and
and a half just for that?
yeah, yeah, and it was
Wow.
filled with really insane theories and arguments from Scientology's attorneys, or Miscavige's attorney was the one who's doing most of the talk,
Right.
Joseph
Well,
Terry.
let's just okay, yeah. So I wanted to go. So the magistrate judge, uh, her name was Julie S.
Julie,
Sneed,
yes,
and you said she was on the young side.
yeah, reasonably young.
Okay, and then the main attorney for the main case on the plaintiff's side is Neil Glazer, but for this little circus, the person representing Valeska and the Baxters was Manuel Dominguez.
Yes.
Can you tell me anything about him?
Well, he did a fine job. Um, it's hard to not appreciate the fact that he's talking sense while
Yeah.
while Scientology side is pulling the strangest straws out of the hat to argue. Um, you just like to be able to have them say to the judge, "Your Honor, this is nuts.
Well, you
Please."
know what, Mark, I think attorneys sometimes do that, but in a more, couched in a legal way. And the
Right.
thrust of what he may have been saying may have been just that. Now Miscavige was being represented. He's being represented in the main case by a former past president of the Florida bar named Bill Shafino. But I believe for this matter, another member of the team, a guy named Joseph Terry, was representing him. Is that right?
That's right.
And he's on the
That's right.
younger side, isn't he?
He is. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. So now, so the plaintiffs were arguing they made all these attempts, and they're not just attempts to serve. I mean, they've mailed things. They've gone to the Florida Secretary of State. They've jumped through all these hoops, right?
Right. Yeah. In fact, that's what the reason we were there that day is because they had gone to the lengths of turning uh, to the state to who do they let me check the notes here to see who they had to go to, the
It was
Secretary
the
of
Florida. It
State.
was the Secretary of State. Yeah, Secretary of State.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah, so they had to file some documents saying, "Here's what we tried to do, and for the substituted service of process, please consider him served." And
Right.
um, so that's what we're waiting on to see if the judge says, "Okay, he has been served." Um, the the arguments that really annoyed the heck out of me, and much of it did. I mean, the fact that they were pretending that no one knows where Miscavige lives,
Right.
or that he's never been to Florida, for God's sake. See, he doesn't live here in Florida. And I know that we've been meeting as a city. We've been meeting with Miscavige over and over and over, and he wants to sit down with each of the council members sometime soon to pitch his plans for the downtown. Every council member except me. So he's told our city managers, no, I'm not sitting down with Bunker. Um, fine, fine. Just let me know where he's meeting with everyone, and we'll get a process over there, right? Okay. Will you do that for me? I don't have to be there. Let me send somebody in my stead.
Right.
Um, so it's I just wanted to keep jumping up and saying, stop it with this
Right.
nonsense.
Yeah.
But I am a calm person by nature, so i
Right.
i waited until the end of the hearing itself to talk to the attorneys and say if there's anything I can do to help, I'd be happy to. Um,
Right.
so, so there was this
Well, let me
argument.
point out let me point
Go
out one
ahead.
of the things you brought up that I thought was great, and that is this Joe Terry guy speaking from Miscavige was they try to twist everything into such strange pretzels. For example, he was saying that there was some change in the law that had something to do with whether or not the person being served is an individual or not. And he seized on this and was going on and on about how the word individual uh, kind of exempted Miscavige. Can you explain how he was trying to make sense of that?
Well, the word individual was in the sentence, but it was not only individual. It
Uh,
could also be individual or corporate head, but he just wanted to focus on individual, Your Honor. He's not, Miscavige was not doing any of this as an individual. He was doing this as the chairman of the board of Scientology. So you got to go after him as an individual. And he didn't benefit at all individually from anything that goes on in these instances. And the judge gave an "oh come on" answer at that
y-
point and said Miscavige has benefited from this, uh, and not as an individual, Your Honor. Um, it's really
I
ludicrous.
mean, one of the things they like to do is, you know, everybody who comes out of Scientology that talks to you and talk to me all tell us that David Miscavige is this ruthless micromanager who oversees every single thing in Scientology from top to bottom. Nothing gets done without his approval. But of course, the church wants to give the impression that he's just this sort of ecclesiastical pope who doesn't get his hands dirty with the individual things. And then the other thing is that Scientology very conveniently, when it comes to court litigation, plays games about whether it's one cohesive thing or whether it's many small individual subsidiaries. I mean, they play on this stuff, so that individual thing plays right into that. And then it's worked. I was going to point out that the last time we got this much litigation about serving him was in Monique Rathman's lawsuit in Texas in 2013. And they made the same arguments they're making here about how David Miscavige is not really, he doesn't do any business in Texas. He's not really in control, all this silly stuff. And the judge saw through it all and said, no, he can be deposed. He should be a defendant in this case. It's still up to the plaintiffs to prove that David Miscavige, is at fault for
Right,
what happened to these people. That's not it's not like declaring him guilty or anything. It's just the judge in Texas said, yeah, he can be a part of this case. He can be deposed. They appealed that, and I'm sure they'll appeal this. They appealed that in Texas, and it went to a higher court. And in Texas, there's this law about apex depositions that they've I guess there's some influence with wealthy people there that they've written a law that says that just because a CEO is in charge of a company that's being sued doesn't mean he should be have to be deposed and the defendant or whatever. And so they appealed on that and won. And the appeals court says, yeah, he's a CEO. He's protected in Texas, which is just mind
wow,
blowing,
yeah,
incredible. So when you talked about this whole individual thing, I don't. It might be the opposite of what they were saying in Texas. I'm just saying that that's the kind of game they play. Is David Miscavige the CEO? Is he the leader? Is he just a parishioner? Scientology will say whatever is most advantageous to them, and it has nothing to do with the actual truth.
right. Right. In fact, they were going over this whole point of whether he should be deposed because of that very reason. And the there was an argument that they went through this list of of all these people in Florida who have been served in absentia
Right.
um, in different cases, and some of them were CEOs, some of them were employees of a company, some were even a stockholder was sued, and that all went through fine. But they were arguing no, in this case, it should not apply to Miscavige, who was simply an individual. So I'm hoping that the judge will see through all of that.
Right. And they also tried to make the point that David Miscavige sitting in his office or not office in California has nothing to do with a ship in the Caribbean.
Yes, yeah, especially since he was an individual. And Miscavige doesn't have an office in Florida. Oh my God,
Oh my
no, he
God,
doesn't have an office here. They tried to pretend that Miscavige doesn't have an office wherever he wants to go.
that's incredible.
Miscavige's attorney said, "Well, listen, I work for a large law firm, and if I'm working in a different city, I can always find some office space, but I don't have an office there." Same with
Oh,
Miscavige. They can always find a place for him to sit down and get some work done. Oh yeah, Miscavige doesn't have an office, for God's sakes. Uh,
right.
but one thing that I failed to mention when I was talking about the other point, the it was even brought up that Hubbard himself, while he was hiding in the desert at the end of his life, he was served in absentia. Hubbard himself. And I thought, well, that is a great argument. And
Yeah.
Miscavige's attorney said that, well, no, not at all. Scientology has been so restructured since the time of Miscavige that it's not the same organization anymore. And
Oh wow.
Miscavige and Hubbard, they're the completely different roles in the organization. It's like,
Oh
oh,
my
wow,
God. Wow.
wow, that's ballsy.
Yeah.
And hopefully the judge will see through all of this. Um, I have started to worry about any case that goes in front of a judge now. It seems like nobody has any sense when they're making these rulings.
Well, that's you're absolutely right because I remember when the Danny Masterson accusers were dealing with the arbitration motions in front of Judge Clyfield, and Judge Clyfield noticed that this idea of arbitration is based on commerce, and he said, uh, "Does Scientology even engage in commerce?" I mean, it was this wonderful moment where somebody dared to like raise the question of what the hell does Scientology do? And I thought it was amazing because the Scientology attorneys at that point filed some documents basically saying, yeah, we definitely deal in commerce, and that's our people, and we can do with them whatever we want. I mean, when the attorneys are backed against a wall in litigation, they will sometimes just spell it out and just say that they can treat people however they want to treat people, people like Valeska, whatever they want to do, and they have said that in some of these other cases. But when we saw Judge Clyfield say that, we thought, okay, this judge gets it. He's going to come in and say this whole contract thing is nonsense. But he didn't. He came into court and said, "Yeah, contract's a contract." And it's
Yeah,
just like, what? I mean, that's why I'm trying not to get too excited about some of the things Judge Barber said that you reported earlier, because you were there for that hearing too,
right.
where they were arguing about the arbitration issue, and you captured beautifully some just ludicrous arguments in that hearing. And what was the example Judge Barber said? He gave them a hypothetical. He said, okay, if this person is signing a
Oh,
contract with Scientology with a gun, literally with a gun to their heads, would
and
you
there's a
consider that
videotape of it. There's a
right?
video
And there's a
of,
videotape.
so you can see the video of them having a gun at his head saying, sign the, sign the paper. Would you consider that? Oh, forgot. I forget the
Duress.
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 Yes. Would that be under duress? And Scientology's attorney had to say, well, No, Your Honor. I mean, he signed the document. Uh, you have to accept that he signed it, even even if there was a gun to his head. Yes, Your Honor. The judge was
Right,
just
right.
flabbergasted by that, as were we all. But the judge may well come back and say, "Yeah, you're right. He signed the document."
Well, the thing about that case. If we focus on the arbitration of it, and Judge Barber, the main case, like Judge Clyfield, it seems like okay, this guy gets it. He can see how ridiculous this whole notion is that just because Valeska and the Baxters were forced to sign something without even knowing what it was 30 years ago doesn't mean they can't sue over the way they were treated. Uh, but for me, the main thing that worries me about Judge Barber is the precedent in his court. That is literally the same courtroom. But back then, it was
Oh
Judge
yeah,
Whittemore's courtroom where the Garcia case came through, and Judge Whittemore decided, yeah, a contract's a contract, and forced the Garcias into arbitration. And then the Garcias appealed, and it took 3 years, Mark, 3 years. And then the 11th Circuit upheld it and said, "Yep, contract's a contract." So that's hanging over Barber's courtroom, and I think it's
yeah,
it's the answer I get from when I ask people I get about that is, yeah, the Garcias were OT8s and they were investing money. They felt they'd been lied to. This is children who were held as
right,
slaves on a ship, and
right.
they're hoping that difference in subject matter will maybe convince this judge that he doesn't have to follow that precedent. So that's the thing we're looking for in that main case. And then in this side issue about Miscavige with this magistrate judge Sneed, it sounds like maybe she kind of felt that way about Scientology's arguments too. Did she look kind of skeptical about what Terry was saying?
There were a few times where she seemed very skeptical, especially when she was pointing out things like Miscavige has benefited from this.
Right,
Uh,
right.
and there was another point where Scientology's or Miscavige's attorney was saying, "Well, Your Honor, this thing with the individual. I mean, even in the older version of this ruling, it still said the same thing." And the judge said, "No, it didn't. It doesn't say
Uh,
that."
right.
So, but I was in Barber's courtroom
Yeah.
for that hearing uh, when when it was laid out that this procedure, this arbitration procedure, has never been used ever in the history of Scientology. That they're trying to force to happen now. And the judge asks, so how many times have you used this arbitration process? Never. I
They
thought
said
that was
never.
insane. They said never.
Well, that's not true. They used it on the Garcias, but go ahead.
No, that's what I mean. That's what I mean in the Garcia case is what I was talking about. I was in the courtroom for that, and
Oh, okay. Yeah, yeah, yeah,
that
yeah.
was a moment where I thought, okay, well there you go. They're
Right.
doing this dog and pony show about how they have this amazing arbitration process that certainly would be the way to go. And the judge, just flat out said, "How many times has it been used? Never."
That's
And
right.
I thought, well,
That's
right
right.
there, that's got to have a lot of weight to it. But no, it didn't.
Nope. It still didn't sway him. You're right. No, I know they've threatened it. The Garcias was not the first case when it came up. I know when Bert Shippers and Lynn Hoverson sued a few years earlier, it came up in their case. I don't know that they had to go. They went through with it, but they must not have. But that it's funny because the Hoverson Shippers case is the first time I learned about the Hooters connection. And the Hooters case is great because you must know this as a city councilman in Clearwater, Florida. The original Hooters is in Clearwater, right?
Yep. Yep.
Okay, so at one point, Hooters was sued by a woman who worked there, and she was forced into arbitration because Scientology is not the only organization in America that has these arbitration contracts.
Sure.
Hooters did too. If you wanted to work for Hooters, you had to sign an employee contract, and it said if you have any disputes, you have to go to arbitration. You can't sue. Well, the Hooters case is interesting because the appeals court, the court said, yeah, sorry, your contract is a contract, you got to go to arbitration. But then the appeals court said, wait a minute, this contract she signed not only said she had to go to arbitration, but that Hooters got to choose the arbitrator.
Yeah.
And the appeals court says, no, 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 you can't do that. You can force somebody into arbitration, but once you do that, that's independent arbitration. It's out of your hands. The arbitrator should be an independent person selected by both sides. And when I saw that, I thought, well, that's killer for Scientology. Because I remember when Shippers and Hoberson were suing, uh, and this was in the Seattle area. They were bringing that up. They're saying Scientology might be able to force us into arbitration, but they can't choose the arbitrator. They can't say the arbitrator has to be a member in good
Yeah.
standing. So
Yeah.
I don't know when that's going to come up because it seems like the Hooters case is really a good one for Scientologists, and I think they've brought it up. But anyway, we got off on a tangent there. You're right. The Garcia case was the first actual arbitration. It was a complete joke. Luis was telling me that he wasn't allowed to have a cell phone on him, couldn't have an attorney. They didn't
Yeah.
keep a transcript because they wanted them to come out with no evidence of how crazy it was,
Sure.
other than what they were saying. And they went back to Judge Whittemore in Tampa and they said, look, they did it in LA. They went back to Tampa and they said, look, this thing was an utter joke. They didn't allow 90% of the evidence we brought. The arbitrators were all Scientologists in good standing. They're not going to listen to what we have to say. And Judge Whittemore says, no, it's fine. It's just,
Yeah.
Mark, what do we do about these judges, man?
It's so frustrating. I found that dealing with politicians um, at every level, or law enforcement at every level, when I turn to the FBI or the state attorney and for some help, and they go, Scientology, no, I'm sorry, there's nothing we can do. Um,
Jeez.
and it's the same situation as it was when Scientology snuck into Clearwater back in '75. I
Right.
have that interview that I did with Ray Emmons, who was in charge of investigating Scientology for 20 years. And he sat down with me and on tape, he said, listen, we'd go to the state officials, we go to the federal officials, and um, no one would help. They'd say, are they going to come after me? No, thanks. It's a religion. Uh, Nothing has changed.
Yep. Well,
But
there are few.
the one thing that has changed though is public
Yeah.
opinion and public knowledge of
Yeah,
how
sure.
Scientology operates. You would think there'd be a
Absolutely.
greater understanding now of what Scientology puts its members through and former members. Uh, there should be
Well,
some justice.
there are some judges that seem uh, to take the time to learn that because it's and it's legitimate for them to learn it because it's in the case in
Sure,
front of them. I'm
sure.
thinking specifically of Judge Charlene Olmedo at Los Angeles Superior Court, who's handling the Danny Masterson criminal trial. She has really done her homework. Now she's made some decisions that both sides are unhappy with, but I think you got to give her credit for at least being very, conversant with the concepts. Whereas
Yeah.
some of these other judges you can tell they just don't bother. They're just like, whatever. And we don't know about Barber and Sneed yet. We don't know, and there's there are few people in this country more powerful than a federal judge. That nobody tells them what to do. And that's good though because they should have the power, the independence to look at nonsense and call it for what it is. I just don't know if they're going to.
Yeah, that's the scary thing. Well, that was sensible. That makes sense. Let's go with that. Nope, nope, not going to happen. It's a religion.
Right. Well, since you were in the courtroom, I believe that was January 20th, was that hearing. Uh, 5 days later, a document was filed in that uh, case which includes an email that's mildly interesting. And I was just going to read a couple things from it. This is an email from one of the plaintiff's attorneys, just sort of memorializing the interactions between the attorneys on both sides after that hearing, trying to work things out. And she writes that the first thing the plaintiff said to Miscavige's attorneys was, "Look, why don't you accept service?" Right? I mean, you're the guy's attorney.
Yeah.
All we're trying to do is get make sure he's aware that he's being sued. That's all this is
Right.
about.
Right.
Why don't you accept service, and then we'll drop the motion, which apparently would cost both sides to take care of or whatever. So, you save a little money. We skip all this nonsense. And the Miscavige attorney came back and said, "How about instead you just drop Miscavige from the case?" Hey,
Well,
look, they're
during
being paid.
yeah, sure. But in that hearing with Judge Sneed, she
Yeah,
actually said to Miscavige's attorney and all the Scientology attorneys, "Okay, are one of you going to accept service for him?" Nope, nope, nope. A sea of no's came
wow.
through, and it's like, Really? Well, can you just tell us where his home is? Can you do that?" Nope, we can't do that either. No one knows. The one thing that I did think was something that could be exploited. Um, it came out toward the end of the hearing that they had not gone to Flag, not Flag, but to Gold. They hadn't tried to
Gold
serve him
base.
out at Golden, yeah, Golden Era
Yeah,
Studios. Um, so there's a way for Scientology's attorneys to say, well, they didn't try hard enough, Your Honor.
right, right.
Send them
And,
out to
I mean,
Gold so they can be ignored there 27 times.
right. And gold is a reference to this large international management base near Hemet, California. It's called Gold Base. It's called Int Base. It's really important in Scientology history. But, my reporting, talking to various people that have come out of there in recent years, is Miscavige stopped going there several years ago. And he
Really?
basically abandoned the place. Oh, yeah. He
Well, he
hasn't
still
been
has a
to
house
Gold.
there, doesn't he?
Well, yeah, I mean, sort of. I mean, Int is interesting because he did a lot of renovating there, and they built this basic monument to him, which is called Building 50, which is this
Uh,
incredible, gigantic office building with lavish interiors. We actually have photos of it thanks to John Brousseau. Like they've got like a $300,000 desk.
yeah, I
Okay,
remember the
uh,
photos.
and it's an office building. You could easily have like 200 employees working in there full time. And I've talked to people that worked in there with Miscavige, and I said, "What's the most number of employees who were ever in that building at one time?" And I was told five or six. So it's just this, it's massive, incredibly expensive, top, quality building that never gets used. And that's when he was there. But I was told that he stopped going to go in base uh, at least in 2015 or 2016, something like that, and he hasn't been back. So yeah, they'll use that as an excuse. Oh, you didn't try to serve him at Gold? Well, then you didn't try hard enough. He was probably there, but the reporting I've done suggests that he hasn't gone near the place in a long time. It's one of the reasons is because he built SMP in town. Once they built that movie studio on
Uh,
is it Santa Monica Boulevard, and it's the old KCET studios.
yeah, I used to
That
live right near there.
Yeah,
Nice
it's
place.
it's it's really become his favorite place now. I mean, again, he doesn't spend much time there, but that's what Gold was known for. Golden Era really moved to SMP, and
I
Miscavige
see.
himself moved to Florida. He's been in Florida for years now. This is
Yeah.
so silly. They're pretending he's not. And like you said, he interacts with you, guy, with the city.
Hmm. Yeah, just this week we were. I was talking with our new interim city manager, who told me that they're getting the details together of what Miscavige has planned for the downtown. They didn't have all of the information to give to the city manager yet, but the chairman's going to get that to her. The chairman is deeply involved with every aspect of everything that Scientology does here. And
Of
the
course.
chairman's going to be happy to sit down with people here where he lives and works while pretending not to. Um, it's insane. When you were talking about the big office building with 5 or 6 people in it, I thought that must be where Miscavige got the inspiration for ideal orgs. We need big,
I
beautiful buildings with nobody in them.
That's a good question on the timing of that. I'm not sure about that. Rinder has an interesting story he tells about that. The ideal org it came about is about 2002, 2003. Up to that point, there'd never been an issue. There were these. They weren't beautiful buildings or anything, but they did the job, whatever. But then two things I'm told changed. One was Buffalo was going to be destroyed through eminent domain. The city of Buffalo was going to build out a car park or something, whatever, and they were seizing the land of their org there. So they had to build a new one anyway. And then the other thing Rinder talks about is, and I think he's not sure 100% sure if this is true or not, but what he had heard was that Tom Cruise had brought a friend to the Tampa org and was embarrassed
Oh,
that it was
yeah.
kind of shabby. So that's where the Ideal Orgs program started in Buffalo and Tampa. Those were the first two. And Miscavige decided, okay, we're not just going to replace these, we're going to really upgrade and make these. And the other thing that I think it's important about Ideal Orgs is he changed them from just simple meeting houses where people could talk to people to these high tech, sort of museum type places that would tell people the story of Scientology through displays rather than
Yes.
human beings. Have
Yeah.
you been in one of these ideal orgs, Mark? Have you
As
seen what that's like? You were at the opening for the Portland one.
Yes, I was not allowed to get inside there, but here in Tampa, I did go to the grand opening of the Ideal Org a few years back, and
Right.
I took a cameraman with me, and I shot some video inside the Ideal Org. Um, Now, inside, I was shooting my own video with my phone. But I had a cameraman outside trying to get some other footage of the event. And I walked in. I just went in and signed my name into the guest book when I arrived there. I don't lie about who I am. I said I'm Mark Bunker, and they said welcome. And this was at least 12 years after Xenu TV, and they knew who I was. But they didn't stop me at all. They didn't recognize me. Um, and we went to one of the displays that this woman was saying, "Oh, you need to find out the history of Hubbard here, and let me start this video for you." And
Right.
she pushes the button, and nothing's playing. She can't get it to work. She has to call over help. It starts to play in Spanish. Oh my God, what do we do? What do we? They're fumbling around with it, and I have all of that on video that I
Oh
haven't
wow.
used yet. And eventually they caught on to me after I left the building and I was walking outside and they had a yellow volunteer minister's tent outside and they had a table there for you to lie on and get an assist. And was shooting a little video with them and asking all about the assists and what the volunteer ministers do. And they said, Would you like an assist?" And they wanted me to lie down on my stomach, and then they were running their fingers down my spine.
Oh boy.
And in order to get some footage of this, I actually handed my phone to one of the Scientologists working there at the display. I said, "Would you mind shooting some video?" And so he actually shot some video for me.
Oh
And
wow.
as they're moving their fingers down my spine, I went, "Oh my God, I've got my audio microphone battery pack." At the end of my spine there, so they're gonna catch on to me then, and they actually, they bumped across it and didn't say anything, and I managed to get out of there. But by then, the guy holding my camera was really fed up with me and just gave it back to me. Now they wouldn't return the phone to me, but at that point he said, "Here, here." Um, but he was the skeptical one from the get go. I was talking to this woman at the volunteer ministers display, and she was the chatty one, and he was sitting there with a dour look on his face, which is what made it even more fun when I said, "Hey, would you shoot some video for me?" Okay, I
Yeah.
will.
Yeah. Well, that was an old cigar factory, right? That they turned into an
Yes.
ideal org.
Yeah.
I mean, they do some really nice projects with some very interesting buildings,
Oh, sure.
but again, I just don't think Miscavige trusts his own people anymore. You talk to people that got into Scientology in the '60s and '70s, and they'll tell you about how nice it was for another person to tell you about Scientology's potential and what it could do for you. And it was all about that interaction that
Sure.
would get people in. And today, Miscavige just doesn't trust his own people to do that. He wants people to be brought in through these displays and these videos that he has carefully crafted. And you end up with this stale museum setting that nobody goes near
Yeah.
because these things have been opening for 20 years now, and they have not produced the rush of new people that he promised.
I went to the Phoenix Ideal Org many years back, um,
Yep.
and it was a beautiful, huge facility.
Yeah.
Uh, there were maybe a half a dozen cars parked outside, um, and the place was empty except for me and like this teenage kid man in the desk. And he just said, "Oh, well, go ahead and wander
Go
around."
watch a video.
Yeah, it was a nice kid, and
Yeah.
I got a letter from him because I gave him my name and address. I got a letter from him a while after that saying, "Hey, come on back to the org." So it's nice to know that I'm on the list. Um, no, I won't be returning. Thank you.
Yeah.
I did wander into the New York org as well. Um,
Okay. I've been in
and
there
I
too.
was
Yeah.
Yeah, I was actually having some medical distress. Nothing major. I was just hot and really feeling faint. And
Right.
they were the closest place, so I went in there, and they said, "Oh, have a seat. We'll get you some water." Yeah, so they were really nice to me. And they put me in an actual screening room and showed me one of their videos and left me alone in
Yep.
there. Um,
Yep.
So there was a time when I could do that, just wander in somewhere, and now I can't. I tried that in uh, Santa Ana in California, Orange
Right.
County. I went into the Ideal org there, and after about 60 seconds, they recognized me and threw me out.
Well, it's
Uh,
not just you. I mean, it's remarkable to hear that when you were at Tampa, that they would allow anybody in that had a camera or anything like that. They've gotten much more strict about that. The last couple of Ideal Orgs opened were in Kansas City and Ventura, and I know. Oh, and then there was Detroit, and I remember talking to some local reporters who just wanted to go to the opening in Detroit, and they were told nope, nope. So I mean, it's really tight now, very controlled. I think the next one they're going to open is Chicago. Austin might beat them. Definitely going to be one of those two. They were ready even before the pandemic, and they've just been sitting there waiting for their opening. So sometime in the next few weeks. So listen, our readers in Chicago and Austin, what you can do for us is go by that building just once in a while, we're looking for a giant ribbon. Once you see this giant ribbon being put on the outside of the building, that's when we know the next weekend is going to be when it's happening. So if you could please keep an eye on the Austin Ideal Org is was built in the same place as the old one, right across the street from UT Austin, and that's that one makes a lot of sense. You got a lot of college kids walking around. Some of the other new ones they've built are really in out of the way places. The Chicago one is downtown, and it's a really high building. If somebody could just keep an eye to see if a ribbon shows up there, because we'd love to know. We'd love to know when they're going to do it. I don't know that we'll ever have as much fun though, Mark, as the day you tried to cover the Portland org opening for us. I mean, that was
That was
someday,
wild.
wasn't it? That
It
was
was,
crazy.
and I was thinking about this. Miscavige is such a coward. I mean, he's ducking
Yep.
service. He does
Yep.
not want anyone uh, to hear a word of what he says outside of Scientologists.
Right.
I secretly went up to Portland quietly, and I snuck into town the day before the event and talked to a person running a sporting goods store right across the street
Right.
from where Miscavige was speaking, and they gave me
Yes.
permission to come back and film from the second floor window. Um, and when I came back the next day, the day of the event, the streets were packed with people, and I said, I'm going to keep my head down. I'm just going to quietly walk through the crowd here and get into the store. I did not bring my big camera so I could, just sneak everything that I needed in without them spotting something suspicious. But as soon as I set a foot across the entryway to the sporting goods store, I heard somebody behind me go, "Mr. Bunker?" And I turned around, and the guy recognized me and panicked and fled to report that I was there. And
Oh.
before too long, there was a police officer who came up there and said that they were worried that I had a bomb with me in my camera
Oh,
bag,
jeez.
and they insisted on going through the bag. Okay, go ahead. There's no bomb in there, but feel free. And the Scientology handler was pacing back and forth, watching all of this, thinking, "Oh God, I got to get rid of this guy. Oh, I'm going to be in big trouble if I don't get rid of this guy." Well, they freaked out the store owner so much that he said, "I'm sorry, you're not going to be able to shoot here today." So
See,
that had
that's
me
the thing.
scrambling. Yeah,
That's the thing is that, if I don't have a problem with a police officer being told, you might have been lied to, but being told
sure,
that, hey, this guy might have a bomb, and you check
yeah,
it out. That's Scientology's being idiots, and the police kind of have to go along with it. But he
right,
did his job. It didn't bother you. But what the more insidious thing they do is just put fear into people, and they
yeah,
put fear into the business owner, so that he was like, I can't have you here, and they kicked
right,
you out. Yeah, wow.
right.
But then you went to
Uh,
a bar, right?
Yeah, there was a bar. I guess it was a gay bar a few doors down, and there was
Right,
I ducked into the bar. I actually had that police officer kind of escorting me out of that store, and I went, "Oh, look,
right.
it's a bar." And I ducked in there and I said to the bartender, "Hey, is it okay if I go up to the roof and shoot some video up there?" And he said, "Oh yeah, go ahead, feel free." And so I told the cop, "Oh, I got permission to shoot on top of the bar." So there was a ladder, a steep ladder, rickety ladder that went up to the rooftop, and I went up
Oh,
there, and there was already Scientologist camera people setting up to shoot the event from there. So I set up my little camera next to theirs and started
right.
filming some of the earlier preliminary stuff at the event.
Yeah,
But they reported back to Scientology, and the police came back and they had spooked. They had called the bar owner
right.
and spooked him. So
Yeah,
permission was revoked, and I had to get off of the bar roof. And then the police were serious about escorting me away from the properties. and outside the district that Scientology had permission to use with film permits. So they wanted to get me out of that boundary and say, okay, you're not allowed back in there. Um, and I looked across the street at uh, like a high-rise building. And I said, well, but if I was up there, I'd be fine, right? Oh, sure.
Right.
If you were up there, so I went and found somebody who lived in that building, and they allowed me in to go and shoot from the top of their building.
Right.
And still, Scientology tried desperately to prevent me from shooting anything. And one of the I forget his name now, but it was one of the people who was harassing um, Marty Rathbun at the time,
It was
Squirrel
John
Buster.
Allender, one of the Squirrel
Yes,
Busters.
yeah,
Yes.
showed up there very angrily, trying to bully me and get me out of there, saying you're not allowed to be here. Well, I had permission from, luckily one of the resident managers was there, and she was on my side because the Allender came back with a cop, and the officer was telling me you don't have permission to be here, and I said, well, yeah, I'm guests of these folks who live here and work here, and the officer turned to the woman in charge and, is that true? Yes. Yeah, he can stay. And then they had to kick Allender out of there. But but while Allender was out there, he was trying to grab my camera, which was
Oh,
perilously on the ledge of the building. I
jeez.
had to keep fending him off. It was just insane, the
Yeah.
lengths that they were going to Allender was desperate to not allow Miscavige to be photographed. And so once he was gone and Miscavige was about to appear, and I had a good shot of him on the stage, and I could hear everything that had been going on before then from a distance, but still the
Right.
sound system allowed the other speakers to be heard where I was. And when Miscavige came on the stage, they turned the microphone way down, the speakers down, so
Ah,
he could not be heard at my position. It was like,
amazing.
wow, Miscavige is so paranoid. He is,
Incredible.
yeah. I'm sure through every step of this way, Miscavige was saying, "You got to stop him now." And when that failed, when Allender said, "Oh, no, he's still filming," that must have been when Slappy said, "Okay, turn the sound down."
And you know what he
Uh,
told Allender? He told him YSCOHB.
huh?
That's an acronym. You may not be familiar with that acronym. That's what he would tell
I don't
Mike
think I
Rinder
am.
and Tommy Davis. Yeah. Uh, oh well, it's my podcast. I can say what it stands for. It stands for
Sure.
"You Suck Cock on Hollywood Boulevard."
Oh, that one. Okay.
Yeah, that's what Miscavige would say to Rinder and Davis. Yeah, he's a foul mouthed thug. There's just no question. But he wasn't just instructing people to turn down the sound so Mark Bunker couldn't record him. He was screaming obscenities at them the whole time. That's what we know about this
Oh
guy.
yeah.
So yeah, that was a great day. I mean, it was tough for me because I kept losing contact with you and I was worried about you, but then I'd hear from you again, and it ended up being great. And in the end, we got some video from a distance of this building being open. What were they so
Uh-huh.
panicked about? It's
Sure.
not like, I mean, it was what you went through was heroic and fun. That was a great story, but ultimately, what were they worried we were going to do? You know?
And even if I had stayed in that sporting goods store and shot a nice video of the presentation, what would have been the difference? We would have
Yeah,
heard
I
Miscavige
know.
say his, "Oh my God, we're expanding, and my God, we're going ideal, and this is amazing." Yeah, okay. He'll give us another long, dull speech filled with superlatives, and
Yep,
everything will be fine. but
exactly.
but he is so insane. And then
Exactly.
the other thing that happened here in Clearwater when I came back to town, there was uh, one point where Sarah Heller encountered me on the street with a police officer outside one of the Scientology events. And as I approached, trying to walk past them, she said, 10 feet. And I went, wait, what? What? She was trying to say, there's an injunction. You can't come within 10 feet of any Scientologist. And she was all dressed up in fancy dresses. I said, well, how would I know you're a Scientologist? And I didn't
Yeah,
recognize her. But she said, oh,
right.
come on. You know who I am. Well, unfortunately, I didn't. But the police officer with her said, okay, yeah, you can't come this way. You've got to walk all the way around the superpower building to get over to the corner you want to get to. I said, well, can't I just
Wow.
like walk out onto the street here and pass, at the side of these cars to get around you? No, no, that's breaking the law. You have to walk all the way around the street. Meanwhile, a couple of the critics who were there to picket, they walked right past them with no problem. Um, and finally, Sarah thought, well, she won this one, so I'm going to start walking away. And as soon as she did, I just walked down the street and got where I wanted to go. But it was just nuts. So after that event, um, when they tried the 10-foot thing, and the officer seemed to be okay with it, yeah, you got to stay 10 feet away from a Scientologist. At the next event, Miscavige was opening up another building in Clearwater. And I arrived, and as I drove up to the scene, I could see that they had placed a Scientologist every 10 feet away on the streets around the building, trying
Incredible.
to
Incredible.
make it impossible for me to be anywhere near there.
Wow.
And there was officers um, there at the scene, and I walked by them, and I walked by all the Scientologists, and I just went on my way, and the police did nothing about it. And after that, the police department said, no, we're not going to have any more nonsense about this injunction. We're not going to apply it to you or anyone else. Because Scientology was just gaming the system so much over nonsense.
Right. Well, and I also
Uh,
think some credit should go to Darth Zander, Alex
yeah,
Gailey, who's an attorney, because he was making frequent trips to Clearwater and was doing some protesting and filming, and they tried to use the injunction on him,
yeah,
and he took it to court and made sure they understood that it only applied to the people named in the injunction. And also, if you look carefully at it, it only applies to protests. It's not
yes.
like anytime Mark Bunker's walking down the street, he's got to stay 10 feet away from people. That's a misinterpretation of what it is.
A
But I think,
purposeful misinterpretation.
right. And I think, the police were forced to take a better look at it thanks to Darth Sanders' work in litigation,
Yeah.
and of course now that you're city councilman, they have to. So I think that thing's dead and buried now. I hope it's so silly.
Oh, it's still around, but
Yeah,
the police department aren't using it to stop anyone from doing anything anymore.
right. Well, you know, when you think about things like that, when they would space people specifically to keep Mark Bunker away, then when they go into court and they act all innocent and they act like, well, judge, he doesn't really run things. They're lying. And this is what the point I've tried to make is that the U.S. courts just don't seem to be set up to deal with something that calls itself a church that actually always operates in bad faith. Always. Every
Yeah.
single thing they do is in bad faith. And I think judges are confused by that. They just can't seem to get their head around the thing that as long as a Scientologist or an attorney working for Scientology, as long as their lips are moving, they're lying. And once you realize that, then things should become a lot more clear about what they're saying about Miscavige, and I mean, come on, we know he's been in Clearwater. Scientology itself put out a flyer that I put on the Substack a few days ago showing him at the New Year's Eve celebration at the Fort Harrison Hotel. Of course,
Yeah.
Miscavige is in Clearwater. So, for them to say, no, you shouldn't be looking for him, you should be looking for him in California, it's just a bunch of lies. And I'm just grateful that you were there to capture these crazy, bizarre arguments from their attorneys. And also, you do a wonderful job writing those reports. I don't know if anybody told you, but that's just some very skillful writing, Mark.
Well, thank you. I
I'm
don't think
serious.
it doesn't meet the AP standards of journalism. It doesn't fit into the same category as Tracy McManus's reports for the Tampa Bay Times. But I try to make it amusing
Hey,
for you
Tracy
and the audience who
McManus.
understands.
Tracy McManus is first rate. She's absolutely great. But the
Absolutely.
bunker has a style. The underground bunker has a style. And Mark Bunker's style matches it. So I appreciate that so much. And hopefully we'll get to have you attend something else for us. But Mark, thank you so much for bringing us up to date. We still don't. It's the end of the day on Friday. We still don't have a ruling. I guess we'll just have to wait for next week, and maybe after that we can talk about that again. Mark, thank you so much for helping us out.
Well, thanks for having me back.
Now I won't go down in Bunker Town again, again, again to witness history ride the storm. Wait to see how reckoning